All right. Let's see. Can everyone see this? Is this good? Okay.
All right, so I will start us off. Hello, everyone. We are the Team 2 for the Spirit of Wonder proposal. My name is Brianna Cole. I am a junior in the College of Health and Rehabilitation Sciences, Sargent, and my pronouns are she, her.
Hi, everyone. My name is Julia Lilligs. I am a junior in the College of Arts and Sciences studying psychology and English, and my pronouns are she, her, hers.
Hello, everyone. I'm Heather. I'm a sophomore in the College of Communication, and I'm studying film and television, and my pronouns are she, her, hers.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shun Yu. I'm from China, and I'm studying College of Art and Science, and I'm majoring in economics.
Hello, everyone. My name is Joey. I am a junior, and I am studying in the College of Arts and Sciences currently.
So here we go. For this project, the purpose of our group is to provide feedback for Spirit of Wonder for reference. Based on the original Spirit of Wonder interview model, our team interviewed 5 college-age interviewees with different backgrounds. We focused on influences to values, goals, and dreams over our interviewees' different growth period, from their childhood to the present day, that they have grown and formed their understanding of the world. So, during our early research, we found a really interesting article, The Effect of Parental Characteristics and Attitude Studies, which was written by Anderson in 1980. And it suggests that the bond between parents and children under different parental background played a vital role in every choice made by children in their future. So I list 3 how here, and these 3 questions constitute the main research direction of our group. So like I mentioned previously, we focused on influence to values, goals, and dreams over our interviewees' different growth period. So for their childhood, we hope to find that the exemplary role of their parents' influence towards their future study and careers. We also hope to explore that some change in the interviewees' values, which affected by the surrounding family members, and their behavior and understanding of the world may change as a result. For their specific growing periods, they will receive some support from their families, and this support may be two-sided, positive or negative. So, our selected 2 interviewers, they didn't know 5 interviewees before, which to eliminate preconceived biases. We completed 5 interviews, and each interview lasted 25 to 55 minutes. We interviewed in a semi-chronological fashion, starting with questions focused on the participants' childhood dreams and values. If interviewees were very interested in a very specific topic, we will discuss this topic in depth. After that, we typed up the transcript of these interviews. These transcripts were then coded to analyze similarity and differences between the participants further, as well as to look for evidence relating to our hypothesis. And at all, we wrote a 5-page report, and it includes all the data from our interview, and we also produced creative deliverable based on that. I'm now passing to Julia.
So Joey is actually going to discuss the results of what we found in our interviews.
Oh.
So when we looked at the interviews, we found a few common themes, and we categorized the results into 3 different sections: themes, beliefs, and shared experiences. In terms of themes, there was a lot of overlap. The most common theme that we saw right off the bat was the fact that a lot of our interviewees had the support of their parents. For example, one of our interviewees was supported by both their mom and their dad, another was just supported by their dad, and then so on and so forth. Then the next most common one we found was family, which we put in a different category as from parent, because it's more about the siblings and other members of the families that aren't necessarily the parents. We put this difference in because siblings don't necessarily have the same amount of weight that parents would, or grandparents don't have the same amount of weight as parents do as well. One of our interviewees talks about how his family has a saying where it's family over everything. And he says that he wouldn't be able to be where he is today without his family being able to support him and his siblings specifically. Another one of our interviewees talks about how their older brother was a really big influence in their lives, in his life, and that they shaped a lot of their identity off of their older brother. And then we also found another theme being education and people really wanting to continue studying and continue in higher education. And this was also very linked to family and parent support, where a lot of these people wanted to go in, are being pushed further into education by their families and being supported in their goals. Moving forward, we have common beliefs that were shared by the interviewees. Everyone had different goals for their future. However, the common trend amongst the majority of our interviewees was the desire to give back through their desired career paths to either their families or their communities. One of our interviewees was raised in a family with a very strong military tradition. This instilled the value of really giving back to their community as well as their nation as a whole. Another one of our interviewees had experienced mental health issues in the past, which we'll go into in common experiences, but they said that they wanted to study psychology specifically so that they could go back and help people who are struggling with mental health issues like they did before. And then another belief was that adversity is a positive impact on your life. For example, one of our interviewees explained how the challenges they had faced in the past helped them overcome obstacles that they found in the future. And this was just from middle school to college. It wasn't a long-term time period. Then moving on to common experiences, the challenges that each interviewee faced throughout their lives had more variation. Two of the interviewees talked about mental health, and another two talked about racial discrimination and gender discrimination. One of the two interviewees discussed the challenge of going into a field that was dominated primarily by white males as a woman who is also a minority. Another interviewee talked about how COVID-19 made his life more difficult because his family is from the Philippines, and that there was an anti-Asian sentiment growing in the country. We will talk more about these results going through the creative deliverable and the discussion, which is Julia.
Right. So I am going to give you all an in-depth look at each of our interviewees. And while I'm doing that, I'm also going to display these word maps while I'm discussing each of them. So this is our mega word map. And as you can see, we also have some key quotes from each of our interviewees down at the bottom. The word maps are meant to show the most prominent words from all of our interviews. And this one shows the most prominent words from all of our interviews combined. So taken together, you can see that our participants often mentioned external influences like people that they're close to, friends, family, etc. There are also some interesting outlier words here that only came from one or two of our interviews, but they were mentioned so frequently that they made it onto the mega map. And we will dive into these more as we go on. So interviewee A was a fascinating person to talk to. He's a Filipino Chinese American born and raised in the United States. He was very aware of himself, his perceived place in the world, and his support system, which is his family. He talked about his family frequently, often circling back to them when discussing the struggles he'd faced in life so far. Those struggles were mainly anti-Asian sentiment and mental health issues. Interviewees A's biggest dream is to be a rapper. The reasoning behind that dream, though, is very interesting. He wants to be so untouchable that it makes anti-Asian sentiment look ridiculous and based on outdated stereotypes. And he also wants to use his music to open up a broader discussion of mental health awareness. Interviewee B is incredibly driven. She too discussed her ambitions, which were present from a very young age. Growing up, she wanted to be an FBI agent. Her parents are both first-generation immigrants, and she emphasized that her work ethic is greatly influenced by them. Her parents pushed her to strive for greatness from a young age, and she continued to hold that mindset through to today, always putting work first. Like A, B's current dream is to be at the top of her field and be successful, but to also make a difference in the world. Interviewee C had a very interesting childhood. She was raised by a single mother who traveled the world for work, and so she too traveled the world as a kid. She was primarily homeschooled for most of her life, thanks to this constant moving, as well as her chronic illness that she dealt with starting when she was 5. C thinks of her mother as a central figure in her life, seeing as they were constantly together during her childhood. Currently, her dream is to work in international affairs after getting her master's. She considers it her passion, and her mother always taught her to follow her passions. Interviewee D is a psychology major who's experienced his own struggles with mental health. Part of the reason he chose to major in psychology was due to his own experiences. Although his
So you
parents—
screwed up.
I'm sorry?
Wait and see what Abby says. You screwed up. Big time. Sure it wasn't the first time? I know
Can
it's
we
not gonna
make
be
sure
the
that
last.
everyone is muted? I think someone has
My last.
some background sound. Thank you. So, interviewee D is a psychology major who experienced his own struggles with mental health. Part of the reason he chose to major in psychology was due to his own experiences. Although his parents were divorced when he was very young, he still has a deep admiration for his dad and his brother, who he considers to be hardworking and kind. Currently, his dream is to work at a children's hospital to help adolescents who are struggling with their mental health like he was. And lastly, interviewee E. Her family is originally from Russia, but she moved to Italy at a young age before coming to the United States for college. She discussed the different systems of education in detail, finding that she prefers the United States because speaking your mind is encouraged here. Moving as a child caused her to feel isolated from her peers, especially due to language barriers. When she looks back on those experiences now, though, she just wishes she had been more sympathetic to what her parents were also going through. She emphasized missing her family and the realization that it will be harder and harder for them to fit into her life as she continues into adulthood. Her current dream is to work as a psychologist as well, helping inmates in the US, but most importantly, she wants to find a nice house or apartment, settle down, and stay there. So now that you have a picture of what our interviewees are like, we're going to discuss what these findings mean.
Okay, so out of all the interviewees that we conducted, we all figured out that they highly valued their family and grew up with strong role models, but they also had different experiences which added to their different values, beliefs, and attitudes. So an article we found called Hybrid and Alternating Identity Styles as Strategies for Managing Multicultural Identities, it actually explains in the article that many individuals tend to make their decisions due to their cultural upbringings or backgrounds. And I think many of us can relate to that as well. So they actually took samples from New Zealand, Mauritius, and Israel. And basically it described the buildup of MISS, HIS, and AIS, which are all identity style subscales. And basically it explained that bicultural individuals tend to have more problems with their cultural identity and have a harder time adapting to psychological situations. So this article that we found actually ties back into interview A, who explained that COVID-19 right now makes his life more difficult moving forward because there's actually an anti-Asian sentiment that is growing in this country right now. So for him, it's really hard for him to adjust and make certain decisions moving forward. So along with the gender or racial problems, we also had gender problems that one of our interviewees faced. So another article we found called Educational Goals of Male and Female Adolescents, the effects of parental characteristics and attitudes. The author, Christine Anderson, basically explains that while growing up, a girl tends to be more influenced by their mother, and then a boy is by their father, vice versa. And that in the past, studies have shown that women tended not to have as high of a level of education as male partners when pursuing their education. So based on these studies and expectations and influences grown and down by society today, women were more likely to have faced more unsaid obstacles than men when achieving their educational goals. So our interviewee B actually realized this disadvantage of being a female and a minority, so both of them, but that did not let her that did not let her stop her from actually pursuing her educational dreams. So along with the gender and racial problems I mentioned, Joey also mentioned that some of our interviewees actually face mental health problems. So we found another article called Why Education Matters to Health, Exploring the Causes. And basically in this article, it basically explains how people with higher education actually tend to live longer because they have access to certain resources and skills that lead to healthier routines and outcomes, both physically and mentally. So in this article, this ties back into both interviewee A and D, who both experienced mental health issues in different ways and saw this as an obstacle, but actually learned from this and learned how to overcome it. So interviewee D, for example, explains that the mental health issue that he dealt with in the past helped influence his decision to study psychology and to decide to pursue a higher education for himself. While interviewee C, she was raised in a military family that taught her from a young age to actually add something back that Joey actually mentioned before also. And so she wanted to add something back and help others who face mental health struggles and also pursue a higher education from what she was brought up with and for herself. So now I'm going to pass it on to Brianna.
All right, so finally, we'd just like to wrap things up by discussing the importance of our research and proposing some suggestions for the Spirit of Wonder team moving forward. First, to summarize the findings of our research, as my lovely team member Heather just discussed in detail, external influences play a vital role in the story of individuals. We found external influences such as people were instrumental in these young people's journeys. This is not entirely unexpected. It is widely accepted that familial figures often serve as role models and influences, both good and bad, within an individual's life. However, what is less expected but becoming more understood in academia is the less tangible influences found in concepts such as gender and race. Finally, we found our goals are not only affected by external influences, but also our goals often affect our external factors as well. For instance, goals surrounding intellectual progression are innately tied to our mental and physical health. Well beyond just simply understanding ourselves and our own stories to a greater degree, these conclusions have a variety of practical implications for our own time as role models and advisors. American culture is widely based on individual passion and progression. The American dream itself is advertised as the individual moving forward against all odds from rags to riches. However, if we wish to advise future generations towards their goals, it is not enough to tell them to simply push forward. We must understand at a deeper level the intricacies of passion and how someone's path is shaped. With this in mind, we propose that the Spirit of Wonder project take more time to explore these external influences on an individual's path and how an individual's path affects their external influences. We believe such interactions are vital to a more complete understanding of the Spirit of Wonder's goals, to examine the developmental trajectories of people in different countries. And if we want to move to the next slide, Julia, we have all of our citations of all the research that we used during our project. We specifically use them a lot in kind of attaching our findings to the kind of the greater purpose. So there's some wonderful articles in there. And if we want to move to the next slide. Thank you so much for listening to us and in hearing our research. We really enjoyed talking to our participants and learning a little bit more about storytelling and how all of these things come together. We welcome any questions.
Thank you very much, Team 2. Wonderful, wonderful, very fascinating and thoughtful research. looking around, see if any of my team members have particular questions that they would like to raise.
Just a simple comment. I really loved the Words of Wonder. I thought that was a really great piece. And can you kind of speak a little bit more to that? Because I'm very curious as to how that came about.
Absolutely. Yeah. So when we were given the original assignment of coming up with the creative deliverable, we were trying to figure out how we wanted to present our findings in a way that was like kind of fun, but also very like information heavy. And I think that it came about mostly from the actual coding of the transcripts that we ended up doing, where I was one of the people who was in charge of coding some of the interviews as well. And I just kept noticing these words popping up over and over and over again. And I was like, okay, well, if this person keeps bringing this up, then this obviously must be something that is important to them. And so that's kind of how we got the Words of Wonder idea, because we wanted to show the importance of these concepts to our participants in a more fun way.
Very interesting. My question would be, as you experience some shorter interviews versus longer interviews, how would you define the difference between the two? And do you think that we should encourage longer interviews because of some reason there's more depth or more material, or are shorter interviews sufficient and equally as appropriate a length and content?
Well, I'll start because the interviews that I conducted were on the longer side. I found them to be incredibly helpful in terms of finding the things that the interviewees found incredibly important in their own lives and the things that influence them. I think overall, though, it probably depends more on the participant themselves. Um, I'll allow Joey to also jump in on this if he wants, as he was the other person who conducted some of the interviews. But to me, I think that it's important to not overstep any boundaries, especially since we're dealing with people who have volunteered their time to let us interview them for this really cool project. And we don't want to make them feel uncomfortable at all. So I think there's definitely a fine line in terms of trying to get as much information as we can that will be helpful, but also we don't want to cause any harm. And so that's where the long versus short kind of comes into play, as opposed, or in terms of, I think it just depends on the person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned the person you're interviewing, because your answer could just as easily have been depends on the interviewer and their style or interest, because I found that in some other circumstances. So thank you. That was a very interesting and unexpected answer. Anything else on that one, or any other questions from our panel? Hudson.
Yes, I want to congratulate you guys on the wonderful job you're doing. And the question I have is whether or not you guys are going to be able, if that's part of the project, to connect with the interviewees in the future and see how their views might have changed.
And maybe I'll reframe the question just slightly. Would you recommend that as a part of the overall project, that there be a longitudinal thing that we should be thinking about in terms of having that kind of ongoing connection? Would there be a natural value in it from your perspective, having interviewed these interviewees?
Yes, I think that would be very interesting if possible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Brianna?
And yeah, I'll take this one. I really think that there is great value in that, because I think what we found is that these external factors are influencing their goals, but also their goals are influencing their external factors. So as this person continues throughout their life, and as they continue along those paths, it would be really interesting to come back to them and kind of see, has that changed at all? Can we see more evidence of that? How is that kind of changed and evolved throughout the path of their life? And also how those connections between their external factors and themselves has kind of evolved and matured. Because I really do think that we found that it was a very kind of equal back and forth relationship. one that is most likely, as someone changes and grows as they go through life, may change as well. And I think kind of getting a better idea of that, especially because our participants were so on the younger side, getting an idea of them as an older side, and as they kind of go through those 20s and kind of things like that, which can be a different stage of life, and kind of seeing how maybe that differs from their first like 10 or so years when they were also maturing and coming to this stage. So I think that would have great value.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Brianna. Yes, I never thought of that. That's a wonderful prospect. So checking around the horn to see if there's any other comments. Mingdi from China. And Mingdi, by the way, it has to be 4 a.m. there in the morning, right?
Yes.
Yes, just wanted to point that out. Thank you for the dedication. Go ahead. What's your question?
I have a general question. I want to know how you address the ethical issues, because this is also a problem that I faced when I was an interviewer in the Spirit of Wonder. So, for example, did you review your research purpose? I remember three how. Three, how will you review that research purpose to the research participant before conducting research, or will you just say how to say it's just an interview? So I'm really curious about that.
Interesting. So how much do you preview the purpose overall before doing the interview itself? Thank you, Mingji. Julia?
Yeah, of course. So we had a very interesting path to where we got, in that our research questions were more influenced by the interviewees rather than the other way around. So when we conducted our interviews, we kind of gave them the basic, we gave them like a basic idea of what this was going to be used for. We obviously made sure that they knew that this was going to be recorded and transcribed and possibly used later, and we made sure that they were fully comfortable with that, both before and after the interview. But when we asked, or when we told them about the process, we basically just explained that we wanted to hear about their goals and their dreams and what that was like in their childhood, in their adolescence, and now, and if that had changed at all. And of course, if there was anything that they particularly wanted to speak on, we kind of let them go on about that for a while. So I think that's kind of how we handled that situation.
Thank you, Julia. Shun, you wanted to add to that as well?
Yes. So our group released 3 how that comes from the early research that we conducted before. Like I mentioned, I list Anderson's book as an example. So from that book, it suggests the bond between the parents and their child. So I think it's really important, and it's gives our group a kind of resonance. So it's even appears in ours. So why not it appears in our interviewees? So it gives us kind of ideas to go through this part of the questions. And we made it regularly. So we split it into 3 different periods to go through the like the childhood, like the teenager, like when they grow into the adulthood, and we go through the value, their dreams, and their
Excellent. Thank you, Shun. Appreciate you for all of your comments and even our questions. It's time for us to move on to our final presentation. Dr. Benke, do you want to move us in that direction?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll stop recording again so we